Hi, everyone. In this narrated PowerPoint of Chapter 2, we're going to cover some of the tools used in marketing strategic planning, as well as discuss some of the key performance indicators or KPIs. Once again, if you want to get the full Monty of every concept talked about in this chapter, besides reading the textbook, you can download the publisher PowerPoints from the Kotler-Keller book that I've positioned in each of the assignment set modules. For anyone who has had the privilege of being part of the strategic planning process, this flowchart should look somewhat familiar. What you have on the left is plans that cascade down from the corporate strategy to the subordinate strategies, and all should peg back up or map to the parent plans. If you think about it, the lowest level component supports the parent one. It should be, if it doesn't, it should be scratched and started again. And if you remember back from your management classes, this is a similar framework. This idea of cascading objectives is kind of the framework behind Peter Drucker and his MBA, or Management by Objectives, philosophy. Most going concerns have some kind of mission statement at the corporate level, and many create one for each business unit to enhance focus. In your own experiences, you may agree or disagree, but usually a secondary mission statement usually doesn't come out externally. It's just kind of kept in the departments or the organization. One of my favorite companies is Nike, and as you can see on the slide, their mission statement is bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. That is their sense of being, their sense of purpose. I'd like to pay you a minute and a half nostalgic commercial from Nike that in itself is a mission statement, at least the message that comes across. There is no finish line. And when you watch it, see if you can identify some of the famous athletes that are part of this advertisement. If you didn't know, the guy who's doing the running is Mark Allen, a very famous triathlete back in the day. Besides the Just Do It slogan, which is basically their mantra, their focus on that was there is no finish line. Well, once that time-consuming exercise of creating a mission statement is complete, as you can see, the next step is to perform what they call a current state analysis, or CSA. From both an external and internal perspective, when I was a consulting manager with Ernst& Young, the current state analysis was really a tough sell to our clients. And they always come back with, why should we pay for something we already know? Of course, we would explain our value proposition to them of using a clear-eyed approach and gobs of knowledge not readily or efficiently available to them. And they went along with it after that. As you've probably done in some of your previous classes and know, there are a lot of tools available to do a current state analysis. And we're going to look at a few here. You have the SWOT. Now, the TOES actually is a level 2, and we'll get into that. You have matrices, which are always fun to throw at. Of course, Michael Porter and his 1,000 things that he can use. And positioning maps. So let's look at the first one. Porter's 5 forces. And if you're familiar with it, this allows you to examine those factors that affect your organization. The strong factors are the ones that you have to take considerable care with. The follow-up strategy step would then be to focus on those forces that are the strongest and have the potentially negative impact on you. I mean, if you look at old Mickey D's, McDonald's, let's check out some of these things. The rivalry, all right? Well, who are their competitors? Depends on what you consider a competitor to them. Could be Arby's, could be Wendy's, could be Sonic, could be any kind of fast casual, quick response type restaurant. And these factors among those rivalries will have a difference. Could make a difference to McDonald's, how quick the industry is growing, the barriers to entry, the barriers to exit. In other words, is it tough to get out and they're going to stay in? Then you look at new entrants. I like almost the opposite. The barriers of entry. Is it easy to get in? If it is, then that's going to be a threat. If it isn't, then they shouldn't have to worry about it. How much does it cost to get into the business? What kind of experience do you need? And so on. Then you look at suppliers. The bargaining power of suppliers. What does McDonald's use? Potatoes, meat, chicken, packaging. And they're pretty big, so they probably don't have to worry about the power of suppliers because they kind of wield all the power. If you want to serve McDonald's, you're in pretty good, kind of like Walmart. On the other hand, the buyers, you and me, they're perhaps institutional buyers that would buy their food, whether breakfast, lunch, dinner. Maybe they have a little bit more power because they can do some switching. And the switching costs of going to a Wendy's from McDonald's could be just literally walking across the street. And perhaps price sensitivity is something that is concerned. That's why you have all the value meals. And then last but not least, the threat of substitutes. And in this particular case, it's not necessarily substituting a competitor, but rather substituting a food or a process. And with COVID, a lot of people didn't go out, right? So either they ordered in, excuse me, or made their own hamburgers and fries, prepackaged, delivered, and so on. So was that a big factor? And Joan Magretta wrote a nice article about this whole framework from Porter, and she summarized it in this chart. So it's just pretty straightforward. And we're going to assume all these forces are strong. If these forces are strong, and the impact on profit, let's just walk through them. If the threat of entry is strong, the impact on profit and all these are going to be negative because prices are going to go lower because you have to compete. And maybe the costs are going to be higher because you're going to be doing more research and development, more advertising to get your product in the mind of consumers. If the supplier power is high, that's going to have a negative impact on profit because it's going to cost you more for supplies. If the buyer power is high or strong, it's going to have a negative impact on product because, once again, you're going to have to lower prices to compete with the Wendy's and the Arby's and so on. And in doing so, you're going to have to entice them with value meals and specials and coupons and more advertising, perhaps, and promotions. If substitutes are high, same kind of thing. Profits are going to be hit because you'll have to probably work on your price points and with costs. And then last but not least, same thing. If rivalry is high, if there are a lot of competitors and they're messing around, they're playing around with prices themselves, then they're going to draw you into that vortex and you'll be doing the same thing. Okay. So this kind of sums up, I think, 4 to 5 sources quite nicely. Matrices are a popular schematic to facilitate strategy. In 1970, the founder of Boston Consulting Group, Bruce Henderson, offered the BCG Growth Share Matrix as a way to assess a firm's portfolio of products. And products could be an actual SKU, it could be a strategic business unit, it could be a product line, and then some. Just on a personal note, one of my employers, Huffy Bicycles, worked with BCG in the early 1980s. This was before I joined them. And they suggested we build a plant in Ponca City, Oklahoma, because the bicycle boom at that time was incredible. We built the plant and we shut it down within a year. So how's that? So if you look at this on the vertical axis, the market growth rate, low or high, provides a measure of market attractiveness. And then down here on the horizontal, the relative market share, high or low, serves as a measure of company strength in the market. I just happened to pick AB InBev, of course, Anheuser-Busch and InBev, the big merger several years ago. And every now and then I like a beer. But they have a lot of products. So if you can imagine them going through something like this, they would look at their SKUs in this particular example and use some serious data and analytics to figure out where they think they are in these particular quadrants. If their relative market share and market growth rate is high, perhaps like Stella Artois, they would place it in here. If their market share was high, but the growth rate isn't all that great, maybe like a Bud Light or a Budweiser, they'd put it down here. If the market relative share was low, but the growth rate of the particular product or product line is high, then they'd make it a question mark, and that's been at least if both growth rate and market share was low, then they'd put it here. So you have a dog, low, low. You have a question mark, which is high, low. You have a star, which is high, high. And of course, you have the legendary cash cow, which is high in market share but low in market growth. So under this approach, the company's going to invest funds from mature, successful products and businesses, your Bud Light as a cash cow, to support promising products and businesses. They're going to support Stella Artois. It's a great work rate, so they have to continue to promote it. And over here, you have a product that perhaps just hasn't taken off yet, but there's a lot of hope for it. And then, of course, their goal is to turn these suckers into cash cows. The company must decide how much it will invest in each product or SKU, a business unit, but it has to decide whether to build, hold, harvest, or divest. And that's kind of where this comes into play. Now, if you've done any work with this kind of growth share metrics, or in fact have done any kind of critique of it, that the downsides that it overlooks some other factors. There are some intangibles within a product line or a product itself that it just can't be placed in a square, and it assumes that these quadrants are independent of one another, and that's not necessarily the case. One of the main examples is if you were to go to, let's say, a McDonald's, which usually sells Coke product, they may have Mellow Yellow in there. Now, Mellow Yellow isn't the most popular drink in the world, and of course, as you know, that is the kind of the counterpart to Mountain Dew, which has a lot more bigger fan base. So, what do? You have to create something for that particular restaurant so that they have a full portfolio of drinks. If you want to get on a Mountain Dew fix and you can't get it, so you'll go with Mellow Yellow. Okay, so you have to look at this with a little bit of a clear eye view. Now, what I showed you back here is what we would call a level one strategy, because basically you're looking at data and you're, and among other things, and you're putting them in a grid. Here, on the other hand, is something that was developed in 1950 by Igor Ansoff called the Market Expansion Grid. And the whole purpose of this is to facilitate ideas for business growth opportunities. And you can see it's pretty straightforward. You can take your existing products in existing markets and try to get more business out of it. You could take a product that you already have and try to get into a new market, whatever that might be, and then develop that market so now you have more customers that way. Or you could develop new products in your existing markets and try to sell them to the same people you sell this to. Or you can go crazy and design something totally new that has nothing to do with your existing portfolio and diversify. All right, so it's just another way that a company can use a matrix to kind of easily format things. That's the whole purpose of a matrix. Probably the one that we've all used time and time again is the SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And without going to the details of it, it's essentially an internal versus an external look at what you're doing. And you look at your strengths, what you're good at, your weaknesses, what you're not good at, your opportunities, what's out there that you could capitalize, and your threats, that's what's going to hurt you. So this is a level one analysis of your current state. All you're doing is through brainstorming, through minimization, prioritizing, you're just putting things in the boxes, which you consider as strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat. And usually you can do this yourself, or you have somebody come in and do it that knows their business. Now, excuse me. Again, the goal is to match the company's strengths to attractive opportunities in the environment while simultaneously eliminating or overcoming the weaknesses and minimizing threats. Here's an example that this gentleman, Mr. David, came up with, looking at Campbell's soup. All right. So, of course, you know Campbell's soup, Campbell's Foods. So let's say they did a fictitious SWOT. So you have your strengths. The profit ratio is good. They got great R&D. They're good in their market share, but they have weaknesses: limited line extension, plant capacity, global strategic management's not working well. There are some opportunities out there externally. Uh, Health conscious people want to select good health conscious foods. The demand for soups is increased in this particular time frame. And last but not least, low value of dollar versus the euro. So you're looking at an international thing, and tin cans not biodegradable. So what do you do? Okay, so this probably was generated using some sort of brainstorming and data. And then what we can do with this, because again, as it is, it's more just current state, we can change this or modify it into what you would call a level 2 analysis tool. So all I've done is modify the SWOT, and we're going to change it into a TOES. And we put the strengths and weaknesses up here. We put the opportunities and threats here. And we've created 4 new quadrants that will take us into some strategies, which we'll do in a moment, that will capitalize on our strengths, minimize our weaknesses, take advantage of the opportunities, and try to eliminate or mitigate what kind of threats. And each one of these has a quadrant name, which we'll get into, like I said, in a moment. And I've done this many, many times where you come up with, by brainstorming, and then in brainstorming, as you know, I'm sure you've all done it before, even as a kid, usually you brainstorm and then you clarify what people have said, and then you narrow them. And narrowing means you try to reduce and eliminate the duplicates, especially if it's popcorn type brainstorming where you're just throwing things out as fast as possible. And then what you do is you prioritize. So apparently in this example, we've done all that. So we've numbered them, and there's a reason we've numbered them to kind of match them together. So let's go to the next one. And what we've done here is looked at our strengths and our opportunities, and this is in the SO quadrant. SO strategies, strengths, opportunities. Maxi. These are the big hitters, most promising. To take advantage of the external opportunities by using our strengths. Okay, so they looked at this strength, innovative R&D with this particular opportunity, rising health consciousness. Develop new healthy soups. That is a strategy. You wouldn't do that in a level 1 current state analysis. Here we're going to level 2. Here we're looking at our weaknesses and our opportunities, WO. This is called a mini maxi. And we've looked at our weakness 1, limited line extension, and this opportunity, increased demand for soups. Develop new Pepperidge Farm products. So we want to overcome our weaknesses to take advantage of some external opportunities in this particular quadrant for the strategy. Here we have the ST, strengths and threats, called a maxi mini. And in this particular example, we've taken our strength 1 of our current profit ratio and our threat 2, tin cans not biodegradable, develop new biodegradable soup containers. Because apparently we have a lot of money to burn, and we put it into R&D. So we avoid the external threats by using the strengths from Campbell. And last but not least, WT strategies, many. And we're looking at our weakness of lack of global strategic management with T1, low value of dollar versus the euro, close unprofitable European operations. So we want to reduce the weaknesses of Campbell and avoid the threats at the same time. This is usually called the defensive strategy. This is very similar to the dog of the Boston Consulting Group. But you got to do something, especially if you're trying to look at a way to mitigate these threats and get rid of your weaknesses if you're not going to put any money into them. Okay, so kind of to sum up with our process start here, of course, you've come up with the strategy, you put it into a program, you implement, and of course, you have to figure out how you did. So the process continues implementation, feedback, and control. One part of control is figuring out how you're doing, right? With key performance indicators or KPIs. And this is just an example of a marketing dashboard where you could have so many things in here: conversions, sessions, page views, bounce rates. There's a bunch of other ones too. On page 29 of Kotler and Keller, there's a whole gob of KPIs, and you can look these up too. There's some other ones that aren't in there. Share and shop or stores, percentage of market share of a brand item just in the stores that stock it. You got share of voice, the percentage of your brand mentions out of the total brand mentions, yours and their competitors. Churn rate, percentage of people that stop subscribing to a service. Of course, you have burn rate, how much you're going through. Trial rate, percentage of market to try the product and service at least once, and so on. Of course, the old saying, quote, you can't improve what you don't measure, that's Mr. Drucker again, unquote, should be tempered with what you feel is pertinent to your strategy. In other words, a balanced approach is preferred so measurements do not become an end in and of themselves. And then last but not least, the idea of process for marketing control. When you take a look at some of the companies and organizations in the Hartley and Claycomb book, the Marketing Mistakes book, a lot of these did not do this. They did not do a good job of marketing control, or they just ignored it and became myopic. So the idea of using some sort of marketing audit, which by definition is a comprehensive, systemic, independent periodic examination of a company's or business unit's marketing environment, objectives, strategies, and activities to ID problem areas and opportunities and recommend a plan for improving market performance. Out of all of that, I think the most important point is independence. Just like what we had to do at Ernst & Young with our clients to convince them that you want somebody else looking at this. You don't want to do it internally unless you have a whole crew of internal auditors, and a lot of companies can't afford that. So that's it for Chapter 2, a review of the strategic planning process, Level 1 and Level 2 techniques, and marketing control methods with KPIs. Take care.